Welcome to Tuesday's 10-minute topic. Our topic today is how to help the dominant early developer succeed in sports. We are talking about those athletes that are bigger, faster, and stronger from a young age. My guest today is Gordon MacLelland, author, coach, founder of Working with Parents in Sport, a UK-based company. And you have two kids of your own you're raising, Gordon, as well. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you. Delighted to be here.
Well, Gordon wrote a great post on this subject that I saw, and I think it's a topic a lot of parents are interested in. If it isn't, don't worry. Next month, we're going to talk about helping the smaller athletes succeed. But let's get started on this topic. Now, it might sound funny, we even need to discuss helping a bigger, more dominant young athlete, but studies have shown that too often success is not in their future. In fact, Wayne Goldsmith, an expert in scouting high-performance athletes, says physical talent is actually a poor indicator of future success. And that anytime he hears a parent say their child under the age of 13 is special, elite, a talent, he can almost guarantee that child won't find success in their sport. Now, Gordon, you've studied this, you've broken it down into some of the things, some of the difficult areas for an early bloomer. Let's start with too much praise.
Yeah, I think any child who sets off and has a huge degree of success is immediately going to be praised by lots of people. Not only will they probably be very popular with their teammates, they'll probably be very popular with other parents, because I would guess that lots of teams are winning at the weekend. And I'm guessing that in amongst a large part of the coaching community, they'd probably be quite popular there as well, because quite simply, the teams are having a huge amount of success based on their physical dominance. Now, the danger of this is that there will come a point where that praise will diminish. There will still hopefully be lots of praise and encouragement. And we've got to make sure that these players who have been so used to being praised, overhyped, are in a position to actually deal with a time when that isn't as prominent.
But what about, Gordon, and this is another blog I got off of your site, praising the wrong thing. These athletes are often praised for the wrong thing, right? Because they're seeing immediate success.
Yeah, and it's really important that we look at trying to praise processes and not outcomes, and that's parents and coaches. You know, it's very easy to give out lots of well-dones or praise that you scored 4 times at the weekend or you've won lots of matches. But actually, it's some of those other traits are the ones that are sustainable and will carry through these dominant early developers. So things like working hard at every training session, showing a good attitude in every match, focusing on skill development, you know, focusing on technique, you know, because there's lots of dominant players who can have very poor technique, and yet they're still rewarded by the outcomes of their games. And as parents and coaches, we've got to be so aware that actually if we focus on decision-making, skill development, technique, that the outcomes will be good in the end anyway, but we're giving them this best chance of succeeding when others will catch them up physically.
And there's been some famous studies done on this where kids who were praised, I think they did like math problems or something, for immediate gratification or for right there, if they were praised too much for the outcome, they didn't want to take any more of the tests because they didn't want to fail. Yet those were that praised for their hard work and their effort kept wanting more and more difficult tests. So
and that's absolutely right. And it's such a difficult thing to manage, because we all like short-term success. And it's all lovely that we can roll from weekend to weekend saying, oh, well, we won again. And little Johnny scored another 6 this weekend. And isn't life great? And tell lots of other people. But actually, there'll come a point where that's got to stop. It will stop. And because the child has lived through all these amazing moments, these amazing weekends, when they start getting taken away or life becomes slightly tougher or sport becomes tougher, it's no real surprise then that they maybe, you know, back away from it, or maybe aren't interested as much as they were. And, you know, they got so used to that early success.
Yeah, they don't know about the struggle. they don't know how to struggle, how to fight as much. But bringing us to the next one, not challenged enough physically, and I know this one very well. I have a 14-year-old who's 5'10" and has been that way for probably 4 years. And I never knew what to do. Do you try to push her to play up, stay at her level? What's your suggestion for that?
I think there's got to be a balance, hasn't there? And I know that your US soccer has started to look at going down the bio-banding route, and you know, over here in England, they didn't like the concept a few years ago based on the social implications of that. From a personal point of view, I think it's got to be a balanced thing, because ultimately children want to play because they want to play with their friends. There's a huge social aspect, and it's got to be fun. So we need to encourage that. But if there is the opportunity, maybe in one of the training sessions a week or for part of a season, to go and experience playing with an older age group, then that's great. You know, and the emphasis has to go on coaches here. You know, they've got to try and work out what level of challenge that child needs, whilst also being aware that they've also got to look after their, you know, emotional state. And that, you know, children have different reasons for playing the game that maybe you or I do. And I've often thought that with my own children, you know, is it a good idea that they've played up? You know, my younger son this year actually has, and their whole team's played a year up. And it's actually been a really good experience, because they've won some, they've lost some, they've had to fight, and it's been really productive. You know, if they'd stayed where they were, they would have probably won quite a lot of games comfortably. So I think it's got to be an individual case every time, and just ultimately in the best interests of the child, both physically and emotionally.
Which can be probably challenging for a coach when you have such a range on each team, I would imagine. You've touched a little bit about the coach's challenge. What about the parent? What is our responsibility to help these athletes?
Yeah, well, I think there's a number of things we can do, and we've already touched on them. I mean, one is to focus on effort, work rate, determination. You can control those, you can praise those, and your child should know that if they do that, they're gonna get a good pat on the back, and that'll stand them in good stead through sport and through life. We need to make sure that we focus on skill development and technique, and we're not looking at results at the weekend or how many they've scored. We must put them in a position to fail. We have to do that. The dominant early developer has very few failures. We've got to find ways of making them fail. Now, it might not necessarily be on the sports field, but we've got to find a way at home. Maybe find something they're not so good at and make them realise that they're going to have to work at something, you know, to become really good at it. And then I think to challenge, for me, those problem-solving, decision-making, understanding skills. You know, they're big enough to cope with things, but how much do you actually understand about the game? And maybe spend some time looking at maybe a bit more analytical rather than, you know, physical processes.
And what do you mean by that? Like, give an example. Would that be like watching games and breaking down what players are doing and why?
Yeah, I think so. And also coaches need to do that in sessions, don't they? You know, children need to be playing in conditioned games where they're being asked to make decisions. You know, there's nothing worse than these coaching sessions with cones put out, queues of children waiting to have a go. Takes 10 minutes to make a pass, get it back. We need to put them where they're able to be creative and not give them solutions, actually let them work it out. You know, if we give them the time, put them in those different environments, let them work out what the solution is themselves, because there's probably 10 different solutions. Might not be the one that the coach necessarily wants, but at least they're getting that idea that ultimately they're going to have to work it out for themselves.
And lastly, what about the athlete themselves? What can they do, or what is the challenge for them?
I think it's a difficult one for really young athletes, isn't it? I mean, they're just there to, you know, have fun and play with their friends, so that's tough. I think as long as the parents are placing that real emphasis on what they praise, I think the children will then follow suit. I mean, hopefully they will realise that if they're being praised for those right things, the work rate, that they will continue to do that. If we can hide away from the outcomes and the scoring, then children won't hang on to that as much. So hopefully by what we do and how we behave, our children will then follow suit.
Is there anything we've left off before we wrap this up? Anything we didn't touch on?
No, I think that was pretty good.
Well, Gordon, thank you so much. I really appreciate it. Your website is an incredible resource. I'll definitely put that up, parentsinsport.co.uk. And I look forward to our discussion on smaller athletes and what parents can do to help them succeed. Thank you, Gordon.
Yeah, thank you.